The Deepening Shadow. A Lovecraftian Horror for YouTube. Part 1, The Sub-Basement. The body was found on a Tuesday, not in the subway tunnels where bodies sometimes turn up stiff and forgotten, claimed by the city's endless hunger. Not in the river, where the currents drag the unwanted down to the harbor and out to sea. No, this body was found in a place that should not exist, a place that the city had forgotten, a place that had been sealed for reasons no one remembered. It was a maintenance worker named Ricardo Mendez who found it. He was inspecting a water main beneath the old district near the Bowery, following a leak that had been reported 3 weeks earlier and never fixed. The tunnels down there were not the clean, bright tubes that tourists rode. They were old, dark, damp, lined with brick that wept moisture and tiles that crumbled to dust when touched. The maps showed nothing beneath this section. No lines, no stations, no access points. Just blank space where something else should have been. But Ricardo found a door. It was not a maintenance hatch. It was not a service entrance. It was a door of dark wood bound in iron that had not rusted, set into a wall of brick that was older than the subway itself. The wood was not wet. The iron was not cold. When Ricardo touched the handle, it felt almost warm, like skin that had been resting in sunlight. He should have walked away. He knew he should have walked away. But the leak was somewhere beyond that door, and if he did not fix it, his supervisor would write him up, and the write-up would go in his file, and the file would be used against him when the next round of layoffs came. So he turned the handle. He pushed. The door opened without a sound. The room beyond was not large, perhaps 30 feet square. The walls were bare brick, the ceiling low, the floor covered in dust that had not been disturbed in decades. In the center of the room, there was a table. On the table, there was a body. It was not human. Ricardo saw it clearly in the beam of his flashlight, a shape that was roughly man-sized but wrong in every proportion. The limbs were too long, the torso too narrow, the head too flat. The skin was gray, the texture of old rubber stretched tight over bones that seemed to shift when the light moved. The face had no features, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, only a smooth expanse where a face should have been. The chest was open, split from throat to groin, and inside was not organs, not blood, not bone, but something else. Something that moved. Ricardo did not scream. He did not run. He stood there, frozen, his flashlight trembling in his hand, while the thing on the table slowly turned its head toward him. That was when the screaming started, but it was not his own. Detective Sarah Chen of the NYPD's Special Investigations Division arrived at the scene 3 hours later. She had been called because the responding officers had found something that did not fit any category they knew. The body, if it could be called a body, had been removed by men in dark suits who arrived before the police and took photographs and samples and the thing itself, all without speaking a single word. By the time Sarah reached the sub-basement, the room was empty. "The ME wants to know what she's supposed to put on the death certificate," her partner, Detective Marcus Webb, said from the doorway. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with a face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. But his voice was tight. "She says there's not enough of Mendez left to fill a jar." Sarah did not turn from the table. It was empty now, but she could still see the shape that had been described in the reports. Too long, too narrow, too wrong. "What do we know about the room?" she asked. "It doesn't exist," Marcus said. "The transit authority has no record of it. The city has no record of it. The building above it was condemned in 1973 and demolished in 1981. According to every map and database we can access, this space is solid bedrock. And yet here we are. And yet here we are." Sarah touched the table. The wood was warm. It should have been cold down here, away from the city's heat and light. But it was warm, almost warm enough to be alive. "Who took the body?" "I don't know. They had federal credentials, but the names were redacted. The badges looked real, but these days, anyone can make a badge look real." "FBI." Could be something else. Sarah withdrew her hand. The warmth lingered on her fingertips, a sensation she could not shake. I want to know who sealed this room, she said. I want to know when, and I want to know what they were trying to keep out. The records were harder to find than Sarah expected. The building that had stood above the sub-basement had been a warehouse, originally built in 1882, owned by a shipping company that had gone bankrupt in 1919. After that, the records grew thin. The building changed hands several times, was used for storage, for manufacturing, for housing during the Depression. In 1942, it was purchased by a group called the New York Historical Preservation Society, a name that appeared nowhere else in any archive. The society owned the building for 31 years, and in that time they made no changes to the structure, paid no taxes, filed no paperwork. They simply existed. In 1973, the building was condemned. The official reason was structural decay. But the inspectors who filed the report noted something strange. The building's foundations were sound, the walls were solid, the roof had no leaks. What they could not explain was the temperature. In the sub-basement, where the old maps showed nothing, the temperature was consistently 10 degrees higher than the rest of the building. Warm, too warm. The building was demolished 8 years later. The rubble was carted away, the lot was paved over, and a parking garage was built on the site. The sub-basement was sealed. No one knew why, no one remembered. Sarah closed the file. "What did you find?" Marcus asked. He was sitting at his desk, scrolling through photographs of the crime scene. "I found a group called the New York Historical Preservation Society. They owned the building from 1942 to 1973. I can't find anything else about them. No members, no officers, no address, just a name." "That's not a society, that's a front." "Yes," Sarah said. "That's what I'm afraid of." The second body was found 3 days later. It was a woman this time, a graduate student named Elena Vasquez, who had been researching old subway tunnels for a thesis on urban archaeology. She had gone into the system on a Monday afternoon and never come out. They found her on Thursday in a maintenance shaft that had been sealed since 1956, a shaft that did not appear on any map. Her body was intact, which was more than could be said for Mendez. But there were marks on her, symbols carved into her skin, precise and deep, arranged in patterns that made the eyes water when you tried to follow them. Sarah stood at the edge of the shaft, watching the forensics team work. The light was bad down here, the air thick with dust and something else, something that made the back of her throat itch. "Same M.O.?" Marcus asked. "No," Sarah said. "Mendez was killed by the thing in the sub-basement. Elena was killed by people who knew what they were doing." "Those symbols, do you recognize them?" Sarah shook her head. "They're not anything I've seen. Not Sumerian, not Akkadian, not any of the old languages they teach in textbooks. They look older, much older." The forensics team finished their work and began to pack up their equipment. As they did, Sarah noticed something she had not seen before. In the center of the shaft where Elena's body had lain, there was a mark on the floor. A circle, crude, heavy, burned into the concrete as if by heat, and inside the circle a symbol that she had seen before. It was on the table in the sub-basement, carved into the wood, hidden beneath the dust. She had seen it when she touched the warm surface, and she had tried to forget it. Now it was here again, waiting for her to remember. She did not sleep that night. The dreams started soon after. Sarah was not a woman who dreamed. She had always slept the sleep of the exhausted, waking to alarms and coffee and the long, grinding work of a city that never stopped. But now when she closed her eyes, she saw things. Vast cities beneath the sea, built of stone that no human had ever quarried. Shapes that moved in the deep, slow and patient, waiting for something that had been promised before the first fish crawled onto land. And always at the edges of the dream, a sound. Not a voice, not music, not anything she could name. A rhythm, a pulse, a heartbeat that was not her own. She woke each morning with the taste of salt on her lips. The third body was never found. It was a man named David Okonkwo, a data analyst who worked for a financial firm in Midtown. He had no connection to the subway, no connection to the old buildings, no connection to anything that should have brought him to the attention of the thing in the dark. But he had been researching the same symbols that Sarah had seen on Alina's body. He had found them in old manuscripts, in archives that were supposed to be closed, in places that were supposed to be forgotten. He was last seen entering the New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue. He never came out. The security cameras showed him walking into the reading room. They did not show him leaving. When Sarah searched his apartment, she found a notebook filled with diagrams, with symbols, with text that seemed to shift when she tried to read it. And at the back of the notebook, a single word, written again and again, in a hand that was not his own. Cthulhu, Part 2, The Archives. The New York Public Library's Special Collections Department was not a place that welcomed casual visitors. It was housed in a wing of the old building that had been renovated in the 1970s, a warren of climate-controlled rooms and steel shelves that held the city's most precious artifacts. Original manuscripts, first editions, letters from presidents and poets and generals. But there were other things in the stacks, things that were not in the catalog, things that had been acquired quietly by people whose names had been erased from the records. Sarah had a warrant. It took her 3 days to get it, and another day to find someone who knew where the hidden collections were kept. The librarian who met her in the reading room was a small woman with gray hair and glasses that magnified her eyes to an unsettling size. Her name was Agnes Finch, and she had worked in the special collections for 43 years. She knew where the bodies were buried. She knew where the books were hidden. "You're looking for the Barlow collection," Agnes said. Her voice was soft, her accent vaguely British, her manner that of someone who had spent a lifetime handling things that should not be handled. "Yes," Sarah said. "What is it?" "It is a collection of texts assembled by a man named Horace Barlow in the 1920s. Barlow was a scholar of comparative religion, a specialist in the cults of the ancient world. He traveled extensively in the Middle East, in South America, in the Pacific Islands. He collected artifacts and manuscripts that no other scholar would touch. He believed that the old gods were not myths. He believed they were waiting." "What happened to him?" "He disappeared in 1934. His colleagues said he had a breakdown. They said his mind had been affected by the things he had seen. They said he was lost in the jungles of the Yucatan, searching for a temple that did not exist. But I have always thought he found what he was looking for. And I have always thought it found him." Agnes led Sarah through the stacks, past shelves of leather-bound books and glass cases filled with crumbling paper. At the end of a long corridor, she stopped before a steel door with a combination lock. She entered the code slowly, her fingers trembling slightly, and the door swung open. The room beyond was small, no larger than a closet. On a single shelf, there were 3 boxes. Agnes took down the first and placed it on a reading table. "The Barlow collection," she said. "It has not been opened in 50 years, not since the last person who asked to see it." "Who was that?" "A man named John Mendez, a maintenance worker for the Transit Authority. He came here in 1972 looking for information about the tunnels beneath the city. I told him there was nothing to find. He did not believe me." Sarah's blood ran cold. Mendez, Ricardo Mendez, was the first victim, the one in the sub-basement. Agnes nodded slowly. "Ricardo was his son. John died in 1973. He was working on a project for the Historical Preservation Society. He told me he had found something in the tunnels, something that should not be there. He asked me to keep his notes safe. He said that if anything happened to him, someone would come looking. He said that when they did, I should give them the boxes. She slid the first box across the table. Sarah opened it. Inside there were notebooks, photographs, sketches. The notebooks were filled with John Mendez's handwriting, small and precise, the hand of a man who had trained himself to record what he saw without letting his fear show. The photographs were dark, blurry, taken in places where light did not belong. The sketches were detailed, anatomical, of shapes that should not exist. And at the bottom of the box there was a journal, bound in leather that had been treated with something that made it feel almost soft, almost warm. Sarah opened it. The first page was blank, the second page was blank, the third page was blank, but when she touched the paper, she felt something beneath her fingers, words pressed into the fibers, invisible to the eye but present to the touch. She closed her eyes and traced the letters. They were not English. They were not Latin or Greek or Hebrew. They were something older. Something that had been waiting for her to find them. PH Nglui MGLW NAF Cthulhu R Lae W Gonagal FH Tan. Sarah did not know what the words meant, but when she spoke them aloud, the lights in the reading room flickered, and somewhere deep beneath the city something stirred. Agnes Finch was dead the next morning. Sarah found her in the reading room, sitting in the same chair where she had handed over the boxes. Her eyes were open, her hands folded in her lap. She looked peaceful. She looked as if she had simply stopped living. The medical examiner found no cause of death. No trauma, no poison, no natural failure. Just a heart that had ceased to beat for reasons that could not be explained. Sarah took the boxes home that night. She did not tell anyone. She did not file a report. She sat in her apartment with the windows closed and the lights bright, and she read. John Mendez's journal was not a diary. It was a record of something he had found in the tunnels, something he had tried to understand, something that had been watching him from the beginning. He wrote of chambers that should not exist, of stones that had been carved before humans learned to walk, of a presence that waited beneath the city, patient and immense. He wrote of the Historical Preservation Society and of the men who had bought the warehouse above the sub-basement, and of the rituals they had performed there, rituals that had been old when Babylon was young. He wrote of the thing on the table, the thing that had no face, the thing that had been waiting for someone to find it. And at the end of the journal, he wrote a single line. They did not summon it, they woke it, and it has been growing ever since. Sarah closed the book. She sat in the silence, listening to the sounds of the city outside her window, the sirens, the traffic, the endless hum of a world that did not know what slept beneath it. She thought of the thing in the sub-basement, the thing that had turned toward Ricardo Mendez when he opened the door, the thing that had no face but knew how to scream. She thought of the symbols carved into Elena Vasquez's skin, precise and deep, arranged in patterns that made the eyes water when you tried to follow them. She thought of the word in David Okonkwo's notebook, written again and again in a hand that was not his own. Cthulhu, and she knew that the nightmare was not over, it had only begun.